Hi guys. The year 2022 started a terrible start for the stock market, and it is no secret to you that the number of large stocks that experienced a significant decline, and this downturn led to the loss of the top 10 richest people in the world. The 10 rich people lost their fortunes, with the exception of one person. Who is this person? And what is the reason for not losing it? Before I tell you about this person and how to benefit from his experience, write me in the comments before you watch the episode, if you can guess who. This person is our beloved, of course, Warren Buffett, and he is the only one among the richest people in the world who has preserved his wealth. As an example, Elon Musk lost about $29 billion, and Jeff Bezos $17 billion. Mark Zuckerberg lost about $8.5 billion, of course, in January, and this is normal, especially after the horrific results of Facebook at the beginning of February 2022, he lost a much larger percentage. And Buffett is the only one who made a profit of $4.5 billion. But what is the secret of how Buffett managed to do it while the rest of them failed? This is what we will discuss in this episode. The first evidence of Warren Buffett's superiority in that month comes to us when we look at technology stocks and small companies, when we look at the indicators here. Nasdaq, S&P, and Dow. We will notice that the Nasdaq is dropping about 15% while the S&P is down about 5% and the Dow is falling by 3%. This is all for January 2022. So they all went down. The market in general went down, but the Nasdaq fell more than the S&P, which in turn fell more than the Dow Jones. Why? You think? And the reason behind is that most of the descent happened in technology stocks and small companies. As we mentioned, in Nasdaq, it has the most technology companies and small companies compared to the rest. Of course, S&P are the 500 largest companies, which means their share in technology is less compared to Nasdaq, and the companies in it are larger. Dow Jones, of course, only about 30 companies, which are the largest in USA, and the percentage of technology in it is less. This explains the discrepancy in the descent and also explains why the wealthy lose money. Elon Musk is relatively in technology, Jeff Bezos as well, same thing for Bill Gates and Larry Page, who is Google parent. And you have Bernard Arnault with luxury goods, but as you know, at the beginning of 2022 people are starting to move a little bit away from this type of goods. But in general, all of the above explains why they failed, but it does not explain to us why Warren Buffett succeeded, because Buffett not only preserved his wealth but also made a profit. Here we have to take a look at Warren Buffett's portfolio. What we will notice that it contains Apple, Bank of America, American Express, Coca-Cola, Kraft Heinz and many other companies. We will notice that Warren Buffett's portfolio is relatively diversified, and by the way, Warren Buffett does not like diversification much, and relatively his portfolio is not very diversified. Apple represents about 43%, but relatively we compare with those we have on the list, their investment portfolios lack diversity, because we will find most of their portfolios about 80% or more focused on the stock of their companies. For example, Elon Musk's wealth and focus, of course, is in Tesla, and part of the cryptocurrency, of course. His wealth decreased by 29%, and Tesla by 11%. Jeff Bezos is down 17 to 18%, his company is down about 10%, and Steve Ballmer, high-wattage former CEO of Microsoft, is down 8%, and Microsoft is down 7.5%. As we have already mentioned, they focus on their companies, while Warren Buffett, and of course when we say Buffett we talk about his Berkshire Hathaway company, we will notice its relative diversity compared to others, and this is the first thing that helped it. And the second thing is the type of companies, and we can say that it is somewhat relatively defensive. What I mean by defensiveness, if we notice here that Apple is a technology company, and indeed the technology went down, and so did Apple, but it did not harm as much as other technology companies. But with Apple the largest share of Buffett's portfolio, about half, Buffett's wealth rose, and this means that the rest of his companies went up. Indeed, Bank of America on the rise, Coca-Cola up, and American Express is also on the rise. But why are these stocks rising? And what is the story of the defensive stocks? We'll explain that later, but before that, I'm going to show you someone other than Warren Buffett. You will be amazed at his results, not in 2022, but in the long run, and this great investor is also known as Ray Dalio, and his investment company is called British Water. If you are one of his followers, this is one of the most conservative that managed to avoid crises in the long run. See what's in the graph between 1991 and 2015, in blue is the Dalio wallet and in red is S&P. This shows that they were not affected by the dot-com collapse, and the global financial crisis. Of course, on the other hand, they did not withstand the frightening rise of .com, but the idea is that they avoided crises. Why again? Because Dalio owns a certain percentage of defensive stocks as well as relatively diversification, like Warren Buffett. But Dalio is more defensive and more diversified than Buffett in assets, as he does not only own shares like Buffett, but also owns gold and so on. Of course, what we focus on is not diversification of assets, but rather defensive stocks. Defensive stocks or non-cyclical stocks, which are not affected by financial cycles, and their definition is the one that is not affected significantly, especially when in times of crisis. Why? Here is the reason, because simply everyone needs these products regardless of the economy. I mean, like utilities, like water and electricity, because in all cases you need water and electricity, compulsory a water company and an electricity company. Consumer staples are also a strong example, companies like a supermarket that in every case you need one. We cannot forget healthcare, because everyone needs medication. And we already noticed that there are such names in Buffett's portfolio like Kraft Heinz for food products, and Davita, which is a pharmaceutical company. The second advantage of defensive stocks is that they may be more popular during crises, and they have an economics classification called inferior goods. And it is the worst commodity, and I will explain as follows. Let us assume that the times are good, the salary is good, and the economy is flourishing. So you think about acquiring healthy and more expensive drinks, but with the occurrence of the crisis, the salary decreases compared to inflation and things become difficult, so you dispense with the healthy drink and resort to the first drink with an acceptable taste, such as Coca-Cola. In general, inferior goods sales improve in crisis because people, for example, switch from eating caviar to potatoes. The third thing is that most people consider defensive stocks as value stocks. But immediately the question arises, should I change my investment portfolio in crises to focus on defensive stocks? Is this what Warren Buffett did? The answer, of course, is no, because Buffett and his partner Charlie Munger do not classify stocks in this way, and they do not look at whether it is a value stock or a growth stock, and they do not divide his investment portfolio by certain defensive ratios at all. They do not care about all this talk. Simply put, Warren Buffett and Munger are looking at the fundamentals, the long-term strength of the company, and looking at whether the stock will bring them the expected profits or not. If this is the case, and the company is simple and they understand it, they invest in it, and if this is not the case, they move to look for another company. And you can say by chance, Coca-Cola and Davita and others are defensive while Apple is relatively not. Well, it is fine, but they do not care to focus on the idea that they should have defensive shares, or should have growth or value shares, and so on. In fact, Warren Buffett said in an interview the following, "I just cringe when I hear people talk about now is time to move from growth stocks to value stocks or something like that because it doesn't make any sense." Because he is convinced that you should focus on the fundamentals, and there is no problem if it is a growth or value share. Another point that Buffett mentions is that during crises the company's costs rise or its income decreases, so what you want is a company during crises that can transfer the excess costs to the consumer, to pass on the cost to the customer. I mean, we have a good example. We noticed Tesla, when the chip crisis came, the supply chain crisis, many companies were forced to reduce their prices in order to continue their sales while Tesla raised their prices because their costs rose, and with that the demand remained very strong. This is what Buffett considers defensive stocks. It is the type that lives in crises, and the second type if they are forced in times of crisis to reduce their prices, but the demand still exists and they have the capital to produce more units, and with this, although the profit margin for one unit decreased, but we sold more units, the profit remained constant or even increased. And again, by the way, Tesla has this idea, as it increases its factories and its production capacity. So the bottom line is, defensive stocks and diversification is one of the ways to preserve wealth, but you, as an investor, have to know what you want. Is your goal to preserve wealth or your goal to build wealth? If this is what you aim for, do not think about the timing of your investment and the transformation from growth to value and from defense to attack at some point. The most important thing is not to pay too much attention to the media. I hope that you always invest knowledgeably. If you liked the episode, do not forget to subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. Rashad, the presenter of your program Hit the Road to Fire, was with you. See you soon.